This story took place in my household when my daughter was about 4 or 5 years of age, and it is a true story. I used to put my daughter to bed by reading her a story and sitting in her room until she went to sleep. This allowed me to spend much needed quality time with her after very long days on the job. We started to notice that when we woke her up in the mornings to go to daycare, she always complained of being tired. After a few weeks of her complaining to be tired and not wanting to get up for school, we started to question her. I knew for a fact that she was going to sleep because many of the nights I had fallen asleep on her floor, and upon awakening to take myself to bed, I would notice that she was sound asleep. After some prompting and questioning her, this is the story that she told us. It seems that very late in the evening, after we were all in bed asleep, she would be awakened by an old lady with a very colorful long dress that would tickle her feet and wake her up at night. My daughter exclaimed that the lady never spoke, just smiled, gave her a couple of tickles on her feet, and just sat and watched over her until she fell back asleep. This occurrence happened for over a month, and although I made it a point to spend the night in her room a couple of times just to confirm or debunk her claims, this apparition still came in the quiet of night after I was asleep and continued the ritual, despite the fact that my large butt was lying on the floor. I never heard my daughter stir, and I never caught a glimpse of the old lady. At one point, my daughter happened to see a photo of a person wearing a colorful kimono, at which point she exclaimed that the lady that had been visiting her wore a colorful dress just like that. Not the same one in the picture, but similar. Now, my daughter is half Japanese, and at that point in her life, she had never worn or seen anyone in a kimono, but she was dead set that this was the similar dress to what the old lady wore upon entering her room and interacting with her. After many discussions with my wife, we chalked it up to my wife's grandmother, who may have been doing the visitations. My wife had been close to her grandmother and was the first one at a very young age to find her grandmother deceased in the bathtub. Needless to say, it was a traumatic experience for my wife, who again was so very close to her grandmother. Prompting more of a description of the kindly old lady from my daughter as to what the lady looked like, it was confirmed that this was my wife's grandmother visiting the grandchild she never got to see. We were overjoyed by this, and yet broken up and wished that we had our chance or ability to see her and express our love and thanks for looking over our daughter. However, as the month passed with my daughter being awakened every night and tired in the morning, with a heavy heart I went into my daughter's room while everyone was out of the house, and with the utmost respect and reverence, I asked grandmother not to wake the baby anymore. She needed her rest for school, and that we loved her and were very happy that she wanted to visit and see her grandchild, but she could no longer wake her up or let her see her. Truly, it was one of the hardest and heartfelt things that I've done, but I knew it was right. The next evening, my daughter had a sound sleep. When asked, she told us the old lady had come to say goodbye and never showed herself again. As I write this, I am so grateful that from beyond the grave, grandmother wanted to see and meet her granddaughter. And although we had never had another encounter with the grandmother in the kimono, I know that she is still out there watching over our family. So, I've had a few paranormal experiences in my life thus far. Some frightening stuff, but nothing that was actually dangerous in retrospect. Last night, around 10 p.m., my boyfriend and I were sitting in the living room trying to find a movie to watch on Amazon Prime Video. We have video surveillance cameras everywhere outside. Two that point to the front door at different angles, one for the backyard and one for the side of the house. The monitor screen is kept in the living room on a table next to the recliner that I was sitting in. I just sat down for not even 5 minutes, and then I heard a child's voice come over the monitor. The voice said,
"Hello?"
I thought to myself for a minute, fuck, does my son have his bedroom window open and is yelling through the window for some reason, and the camera's picking it up because there's a camera next to his bedroom window? Then I remembered, no, it can't be, because he was sleeping in my bed. I called up to him, and he answered. I look at the monitor screen, and I see a man who appeared to be very tall. He was wearing a red and white flannel shirt. He was holding a little girl's hand. She looked like she had striped long sleeves with frizzy blonde hair. They were walking up the steps to get to our entryway, and I turned to my boyfriend and said, "Somebody is here." We live in the middle of absolute nowhere. We live by a swamp. My closest neighbors are bears and coyotes and a couple of Amish houses about a mile or so down the road. So there are never ever any people, at least that we know of, who go walking down our street pitch black with no streetlights on a back road at 10 p.m. at night, so it seemed very strange to us. Just as the man and the girl get to our front door, my boyfriend opens the door and they were gone. Not a single trace or sign of them. My boyfriend goes outside by the road to see if he could see any cars, but there was nothing. We thought maybe that they were having car trouble and stopped for some help, but there were no signs of that being a possibility. I let the dog outside, and my boyfriend went outside with a flashlight, but nothing was there. We watched the camera footage, and the people coming to the door never recorded. We reviewed old camera footage and saw nothing that looked or sounded like that. We don't even know people that looked like that, or anyone that could have possibly come over that looked like that. My boyfriend does not believe in ghosts, but seeing that we had no explanation for it, I think he changed his mind. We have lived in this house for 4 years, and I personally have never experienced anything until last night. My boyfriend admitted that one night when I was at work, he saw something moving in the yard and thought that it was an animal, but went out to look and nothing was there, but my son's tire swing was swinging back and forth like crazy. My son has been complaining for the past few months that he doesn't like to sleep in his bed because it sounds like something is crawling around under his bed and his bed shakes. The original part of the house was built in the 1800s and was used as an old schoolhouse. In addition, it was put onto the house 20 years ago to make it bigger. The old schoolmaster used to live across the street in a house that is no longer there. I talked to my boyfriend today, and we both said that what happened is really weird, and we've come to terms with it probably being a ghost sighting. I know I'm not crazy because he saw them and heard the voice too. I've seen many ghosts in my lifetime. I just wondered why it took so long for me to see one here. What bothers me is that it seemed like they wanted to get my attention, and it makes me feel very uneasy. A few days leading up to this, I would sit in the living room and just feel overwhelming dread and terrible anxiety. After seeing them, I don't feel any of that anymore. So weird. Update. My son hasn't been sleeping in his room because I'm not forcing him to. When he tells me these things, I let him know that I believe him 100%. We are turning what used to be his playroom into a new bedroom. I wanted to see what he was experiencing in his current bedroom, so I went there myself and took my naps before work in his room. I work the night shift, and every single night I would have a nightmare. So I said that he can sleep in my room until his new room is ready, which will be ready, hopefully, in a couple of days. I was working as a speech therapist doing some home health in Florida. One of my patients was Harold. He had suffered from a stroke, and my job was to help him regain his speech. Sweet man in his 70s. His wife was Gertrude, an equally sweeter older woman, German accent. She treated me like a guest each time I visited her home, even made me cookies and tea. Carrying on conversation with her was tough because she was hearing impaired. One day, I stopped by for my regular visit, knocked on their apartment door, but got no answer. I knocked louder and heard Gertrude say,
"Harold, somebody is at the door."
When the door didn't open, I knocked louder and said, "It's Ashley. I'm here for Harold's speech therapy." Again, I heard Gertrude tell Harold to get the door, but nobody answered. I decided to go back to my car and call their apartment from my bag phone. If you're old, you'll remember a huge purse-like phone that came before cell phones. Since there was no answer, I left a message saying that I was in the parking lot. Nobody was opening the door, and I'd wait for a few minutes, but then leave to try to reschedule the visit for later in the week. The door never opened, so I left. Later that day, I stopped by my office to drop off my therapy notes. My secretary said I had a phone message from Harold's son. He was apologizing for the missed appointment, but that Gertrude had passed away the previous night, and Harold was with family making arrangements. The message hit me like a ton of bricks. I had heard Gertrude's voice just that morning. I tried very hard to rationalize the situation. Maybe I was hearing a TV? But no, it was Gertrude. She used Harold's name in her German accent. Maybe I was imagining things. But no, this was in the middle of a bright, sunshiny Florida day, not some midnight stroll through a graveyard. My imagination hadn't even been thinking of the paranormal. I heard a ghost. She heard me. I will never ever forget this experience. Nothing like it has happened before or since.